those listening, thanks for joining our podcast. It's the officially the first one. It might not be the first take by the time you're listening to this, but we definitely hope it's the first take. Thanks for listening. I mean, we're relatively new here to Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I'll probably call it Twitter as we talk here because it's kind of what I'm known as. We're Twin Cities Hockey. We started last July, kind of after the whole Quinnipiac and Logan Cooley stuff. A lot of mixed opinions between me and him, and I think after 4 years at the U, 4 great years at the U actually, we decided to start a podcast and kind of put our opinions out onto more of a global platform, and we're here starting a podcast with it. So I thought before we talk about everything, because there's a lot to talk about with the transfer portal. You got the recruits coming in next year that are great recruiting class again by Motzko. You got some departures from the U, obviously the 3 graduate players, and then 2 fourth-line guys have left. So we'll talk about that, but yeah, we'll talk about us first. I mean, I'm Josh, alongside me is Jack. We've known each other for, I would say, 20 years probably. Our Gopher kind of following starts when we were really young. My parents were never really into the Wild, so I kind of got into the Gophers at a young age. Around the Goligoski, Johnson, Wheeler years was kind of when I was really understanding hockey. I firmly believe that they're at that point in time, even now, there's no better place to be on a Friday or Saturday night than Mariucci Arena. And just following that, kind of a big reason why I went to the U was because I wanted more hockey. I know that the attendance took a little dip when the Gophers left the WCHA, but I think the Big Ten's really picking up now, and I think that the future of Gopher hockey looks really bright. And so obviously I loved Gopher hockey. It kind of brought me together with my father, and that's kind of how I got into it. And I'll let Jack kind of give his spiel, but that's kind of how I got into Gopher hockey.
Hey everyone, I'm Jack. Like Josh said, I'm just Minnesotan, born and raised, huge Gopher fan, and that just comes from my dad as well. He's a Gopher alum, and ever since I was a kid, he was just always a massive hockey fan. He'd take me to Gopher games, Wild games, and I thought it was just like the time of my life. So ever since a super young age, I've always wanted to go to the University of Minnesota and be a student there, and I'm just really excited that I got to do that in my life. I played hockey for 7-8 years of my life, and Josh was a big part of that. We were on the same team a lot. We'd go to games together, and pretty much since we were young, we were probably disagreeing about hockey, and we thought instead of just, bickering between ourselves, we'd bring it to a wider audience, and I think we're both really excited to do that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people come to me over the last couple months while we've been running this account. I'm like, why Twitter or why X? And I think it really comes to how just the ability to be involved in hockey now is just it's way more open than it used to be, and that was probably a time where I wasn't around when it really wasn't. I just think with social media now, I mean, you look at the guys from like everything college hockey. I mean, how they built their platform, and it's really become something huge. I mean, like it grows it's growing the game, and I think that's the biggest thing for college hockey. And I'll argue this, every day of the week, that college hockey is a criminally underrated sport. And obviously, I know it doesn't get the traction that it probably deserves, but I think that that's going to change as the years upcome with how much more people are able to get involved. That not just playing hockey, but being part of it. So obviously, we have a lot to talk about. The transfer portal has been big in the last couple weeks. We've had some departures from the U with some fourth-line guys, and then obviously some key players over the last 5 years. I think we should first probably get into the transfer portal. I feel like that's the biggest piece. Obviously, I'm pretty opinionated about the transfer portal. I know I was listening to Spit and Chicklets the other day, and I think Biz made the best point about the transfer portal, that it should be. I think it surprises me that when it was made, there was no regulation on how many times you could transfer. Yeah. Because I'm an optimist, and I look at the transfer portal as I look at a guy like Jake Parcheski for Michigan, goalie for Canisius last year, put up good numbers, got the opportunity to transfer to a big school, and he's playing in the Frozen Four next week. I think that's a great story. And then on the other side, you have people like Austin Swankler up at Michigan Tech, who obviously if you guys know, Swankler is involved in some stuff at Bowling Green, so he was pretty much forced out of Bowling Green, went to Michigan Tech, had a pretty quiet year, but now he's back in the transfer portal, and and now with even NIL in the play now, money's at play now. I think that we're going to see some regulations on the transfer portal here. But as everybody knows, the transfer portal's here to stay, and it's good for college hockey in ways. But we also need to fix it, and obviously with the transfer portal news as of late, with I think Matthew Wood kind of headlines everything for Gopher fans. I was pretty invested in that for a couple weeks, but we haven't heard anything about that as of now. So I'm pretty sure that we should hear about that pretty soon here. But yeah, if you don't know, Matthew Wood was a first-round pick of the Predators. He's, I guess, in the transfer portal now, and one of the big things that came out where he was favored to go to the U of M, and obviously we haven't heard anything about that then. But yeah, obviously me and Jack's got some pretty different views on the transfer portal. Jack, what do you think your views are?
I think the transfer portal is one of those things where, both sides, I feel like to some extent you can kind of understand. On one side, the players I believe should have the opportunity to better their future. At the end of the day, they are students. I feel like any student would like the freedom to go wherever they want. But then again, there's the other side of the story where it becomes a lot more difficult for you to grow your program and to really become one of those top-notch schools. But I think a great point that you just recently brought up was about the NIL, which is something that I never really thought about. And with NIL money, I think it gives, players just kind of even more of a reason to kind of go to those big ticket schools, like your blue bloods. So Michigan, Denver, BU, Minnesota. If you're a small town guy going to a smaller college and you're having a blowout year and you have the opportunity to go to a big school, it's kind of hard to justify staying at a smaller school. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I that's why I brought up Jake Barczewski. I thought he was a great example of why the transfer portal works. There's so many other great stories, and I think there will be this year too. You look at Hunter Johannes last year. He was an Eden Prairie guy, played at Lindenwood for a year. I don't know offhand what his numbers were, but he had a great year with North Dakota. He had a crucial goal too in the I think it was the Michigan game. He scored the second goal. Yeah, no, he's a great player. I think the transfer portal offers some unique opportunities for players, but also with the NIL, look at Dinkytown athletes. They've made a great step since last year. I think a lot of the Gopher fans got a little concerned about NIL stuff after Yzerman left, and now I think the Dinkytown athletes is really finding their stride, and I think you saw that with Snuggerud staying too, is that they're finding their stride, and seriously, I think that's the reason Snuggerud stayed. Now I know I've been hard on Snuggerud in the past, but I think that, with Snuggerud staying, I think that it really shows to the volumes that NIL is doing for the Gopher hockey program. So, on the other end, though, you look at NIL, and, well, it's good for the Gophers. A lot of the time, it makes me wonder, what's it going to do for, programs like, St. Cloud State, Mankato, smaller schools that don't have that kind of, those donors. You look at St. Thomas, though. St. Thomas is a different story. They got that huge donation from the Anderson family a couple years ago, which, if you've read anything that I've ever written, that money was supposed to be the use, but we're not going to talk about that. It's past. But I'm curious what it's going to do. Because, even for Massachusetts school, you look at BC, BU, they're pretty good with money. But you go to UMass, you go to UMass Lowell, you go to Harvard, would probably be fine. But you go to Northeastern, you go to small schools. What's that going to do for college hockey? How's that going to change the recruiting? Because, here's what I see it as: I look at a guy like Logan Cooley as a stamp for Gopher hockey. Obviously his cousin LJ committed last summer. But if I'm a recruit, I look at oh my God, Logan Cooley went to the U. Why is that? Maybe that's a good place for me to go. You look at the ability to recruit big time talent, because here's the thing: is the national team development program is going to produce great athletes for the next 10 years. That it's the place to go. I mean, you look at like the recruits coming in, like not next year, but the year after. You've got Mooney, Kwasnicka. I mean, you got all those guys are like quality players. I mean, how are the smaller schools going to compete? And obviously, there's people that know way more about this than us, and I'm completely okay with that. But what does it do for like the small schools like St. Cloud State, Mankato State, Bemidji State? How are they going to compete in this environment?
And yeah, I think that's just like the main issue here is like that's where college is different. It's not like the NHL where like there's like an equal draft program or like if your team hasn't been great, you're gonna get that better draft pick. That doesn't exist in college. College just strictly relies upon high tier recruiting kids in high school and throughout all these different programs, and it's just you got to convince the kid to go to your school. That's all it really takes. And like I said earlier, especially with NIL, it's just if a kid that age can make more money going to a bigger, better school, more fans, more attention, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to disagree with them. And I don't think that it's such like a touchy situation, especially like now, because it's we're starting to see the repercussions of it. We're starting to see the problems that it arises. Whereas like in the past, like you had smaller schools really competing because they drafted top tier talent.
And to go off what you said, I mean, yeah, you are seeing like first hand examples of it. I mean, you look at the football side. I mean, you look at that I think he was an offensive lineman. He was at Alabama, put himself in the portal, went to Iowa, got involved in their NIL collective, and then transferred back. Or actually, I don't even know what happened, but he got involved in Iowa's NIL collective and went back to Alabama. I mean, it's one of those topics that I think the transfer portal, there's a fix. I think that there should be a one transfer maximum. I think, or a 2-year commitment. I mean, because here's the thing: is this next year is going to be the last year of the 5th-year option because of COVID. Like, I mean, I think there should be a one transfer maximum. I just don't see any reason that anybody should be able to transfer every single year.
And I think that's like the only scenario where like you don't completely piss off one side. Because like if you get rid of the transfer portal, I mean the big schools are going to throw a fit. And if you leave it be in its current iteration, then I honestly, my honest opinion, I don't see the smaller schools be like a top tier competitor like as much as they used to be.
Yeah, and you risk losing like those those upbringing programs like UMass, UMD. I mean, UMD's won what? They won 2018, 2019, or maybe it's the other way. It's 2017, 18. But what's going to happen with UMD? I mean, UMD's a storied program too. I'm not on top of where the money's going where. I know the U of M's had some NIL troubles. I mean, it's not just, these small schools. But I think that NIL is going to play a huge factor, and it's not just hockey either. I mean, you look at basketball. I mean, they released the stat sheet of how the NIL collective at the U of M is being divided. The basketball programs is below the hockey program, and it should be the other way around. But I feel like that's more because the basketball programs and it's more of a mediocrity state right now, and that's going to change. I think Ben Johnson is a great coach, and he proved himself a lot more this year. I know a lot of people are skeptical of the hire. I was too. I think that obviously you had Musselman was in the conversation. Now he's over. I think he just took the USC job, but it's how NIL is. It's gonna be interesting how it plays out, and I don't think I have any more to say about that. I think it's just we have to kind of wait and see how NIL is gonna play out. So obviously, I think the next thing we got to talk about is I think we got to recap the 2024 to 23-24 season actually. I don't know how to put it into words. I think it was inconsistent would probably be the word I'd use. I don't think that it was bad. I think that it was inconsistent. I think we saw the first game kind of what we saw all year. I think that this Gopher team had the talent to play with the big dogs. because and I think that's kind of a dumb statement because I think the Gophers are a big dog, but I think that we saw them play down to the levels of their opponents sometimes, and I think we saw it with Ohio State. That last part of like the first half of the season where they settled for that shootout loss. Don't even start on the shootouts right now. That's a topic for a different podcast. I mean, we had five? I think they had 5 shootout losses and they didn't score a single goal in a single one of them. I mean, come on. But you look at the Gophers season, I think you have to be happy because when I look at this roster, I look at it as you don't have Cooley, you don't have Nyes, you do have Snuggerud, but I think Snuggerud, and I wrote this before, and I wrote this, I think that Snuggerud really relied heavily on that talent surrounding him. And I'm not saying that Oliver Moore isn't that. Oliver Moore is a fantastic Gopher, but he is a freshman and he is not Logan Cooley. And I think the only way Oliver Moore's game is going to go is up. And I think that Snuggerud next year will have a lot more support around him. I think with a deeper lineup, and I think that Snuggerud will have a lot better of a year next year.
Yeah. Kind of just going off of what you're talking about, Oliver Moore. For those of you who have seen that kid play in person, he has some absolute wheels on him. I heard about him before the season started, and people were saying he was fast. But if you see this kid skate in person, he's another type of talent. He's up there, and I think that is probably the biggest part of his game. And I'm not sure if it's a scheme thing, or what it was this year. I don't know if he's still a super young kid, but I think that if the Gopher program and him himself, if they can figure out a way for him to really develop that speed within the high-paced game and really utilize that kid could be an absolute blowout player. And I seriously think that there's something special there with Oliver Moore, especially with the talent that we have coming in to support that. I think that next year could be super special.
But even looking back at last year, I think that the struggle came from identity. I think that you saw it with the Wisconsin series. I think Wisconsin kind of gave them that Mankato, I'm in your face. That they had to make quick decisions, and that's what Mankato was. And as much as I don't like the Badgers, Mike Hastings is a fantastic coach. I mean, his philosophy is I'm going to get older players that are going to grind, and players that know how to play defense. Because here's what I take out of it. I take out of it as Hastings wants older players because older players listen to him better than younger players. And I think and from what I've heard is he's tough on his players, and he wants them to play a certain way. And I think I think you saw that at Wisconsin a little bit this year. I think he started out really strong. I know they were number 1 in the country at one point, but they've really fell off in the second half of the season. And I think that was from the youth not knowing how to react to his coaching style. But yeah, we saw that with that sweep. I remember leaving the arena after that sweep. I didn't know what to expect. We didn't know Wisconsin was be that good. I had an idea that they would be kind of one of those toss-up teams. But yeah, and then obviously the week after that they responded with a great game against North Dakota and Grand Forks. I know people are like, North Dakota didn't play a great game, whatever. But that doesn't. I mean, dude, going to North Dakota in front of those fans and winning 4-1, it doesn't matter how the other team played. I mean, that's a tough thing to do. And obviously, they didn't play as well the next night, but I think North Dakota played a lot better. And I think North Dakota, on the other hand, that was a great bounce back year for them. Obviously, they went to the portal and they utilized the portal on defensively because they lost everybody pretty much. And now they're kind of. We saw that they dove back in the portal again for a goalie. They got Semptimphelter from ASU, who he kind of got kicked out. I think a little bit with I think his name's Gibson Homer. He kind of took over halfway through the year, and I think Semptimphelter is going to have a great opportunity with North Dakota next year. But yeah, recapping the season, I think inconsistent was probably the word, and I think kind of trying to find their identity was tough. I mean, you saw it with that first Penn State game. I think they went to Happy Valley. I think the shots on goal were around 15-1, or no, 15-0 or something like that. And Gophers' first shot they score and they win that game. I don't remember what it was, but they didn't. It wasn't close. And then the next game they get kind of blown out, and you're kind of like, well, where's that Gopher team that we saw yesterday? And we did see that last year a little bit. I think the Gopher team last year and this year, you can't really compare them because they're different. The Gopher team last year, you had Brock Faber. Brock Faber, I think, should win Calder. I don't, obviously Bedard's a superstar. But Brock Faber, I think, is the most impactful player in the NHL. And, you know, you can't, like, I know a lot of people are, like, kind of expecting, like, you know, Oliver Moore to live up to this Cooley type of stuff. And I'm like, you can't expect that out of a kid. I mean, he wasn't touted to be that guy. Cooley was. I mean, Cooley, you know, obviously originally committed to Notre Dame, flipped his commitment to go to the U, and Cooley could have, if he was a 4-year guy, could have probably broken every NCAA record. He was that good.
And for those who are like watch last year's team, if you really rewatch every single game, I think Brock Faber made just an absolutely immense impact, and I think the NHL is now even seeing how great of a player he is. But I think what we kind of lost this year in that on the offensive core with Cooley and Nyes leaving, I think what made them so good is under Bob Motzko. I feel like those teams, you know, who may not have all those draft picks, who don't have that like top tier skill that is like going to the NHL in a couple of years, those teams who are up in the Gophers' face are difficult to play against. And I think what we lost in Cooley and Nyes is just the creativity that they had just to create space. And I think that this year we didn't really have that creativity or inspiration that last year you saw. I mean, every single year it felt like Gopher fans were walking in that arena expecting to win because of how consistent that team was.
And I agree with you to an extent. I think that the creative part, you're kind of hitting it like right on the nail. But I think that like even last year's team, I mean, man, the offense, I mean, you look at it, the only people we lost were Nyes and Cooley. I mean, you can't. I say this carefully because I say that you can't rely on two players. You can't because we've seen it before. But I think what the Gophers really missed this year was that experienced decor. I mean, you got Lacombe, Johnson, Faber, all those guys, and now you come in. You know, Rinzel really proved himself. I mean, you don't even have to people didn't even watch, and like he was like racking up all these assists and was a huge impactful player. Obviously, he needs to grow his game a little bit, and that's why he'll be back here next year. I mean, he's first round pick of the Blackhawks, and yeah, he was good. I mean, I think, and especially with next year, and we'll get into next year's players come in. I think the Gophers' blue line next year should be really good. And I know Bob Motzko said in one of the post game things that he didn't think that his blue line was that different from last year, and I kind of disagree with that because I think that, I mean, Lacombe, great defenseman. He's a little more offensive. Too. I think Faber, I mean, no question, is, I mean, probably one of the best Gopher defensemen of all time. He's a committed, he came back for a reason. He wanted to win a national title. He wasn't chasing the dough in the NHL, and he wanted to win a national championship. And I don't think there's a guy more that I want to see win a Stanley Cup right now than Brock Faber. But I think going back to the team this year, I think that identity was a huge issue. I think I was optimistic though, but like going into the second half because they did really play well. I know the first Colorado College game that was kind of like a little sleeper game, you know. And Colorado College was good. I mean, you got to give them respect. I mean, they knocked it to North Dakota both series, and just like, I mean, I think I saw they like missed the tournament by like maybe like the smallest margins possible. I mean, that's a good team. I mean, and then they came back, and you know, obviously Snuggerud had that hat trick, but I think the Gophers really did kind of like start to get that identity in this first part. I mean, obviously you play Robert Morris. Robert Morris is kind of like that. They're back after a long time off because of their program, I think, lacked funding. And you go play Ohio State. And I will say, I think we went to that Ohio State game. I think we looked at each other and we go, no, this is probably the best I've seen the Gophers. Like that first game, I mean, I think Pitlick had a hat trick. I think we looked at each other and go, the Gophers look really good right now.
Yeah, that Ohio State game, I think that is like, out of all the games that I saw this year, that was easily, like, that kind of really shown, like, the roots of what we had last year. Like, we were completely dominating the play. The entire game was in Ohio State's zone, and they were just going the entire game. And I don't know if, like, we really saw that level of play consistently throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and then you know, the next week, I mean, because I remember, you know, looking at the schedule, I go, you come back and, you know, you've got, you know, Robert Morris, Colorado College, Ohio State. I mean, that could be 3 straight sweeps, and you know, they don't do it against Colorado College, but then you go and play Wisconsin, Michigan State rather, all on the road, and I mean, to an extent, they didn't play bad, but that one Michigan State game, I mean, it just reminded me of the Quinnipiac game. I mean, they played 2 great periods of hockey, and then just in the third period, just forgot how to play, and they lost it. They lost the game in the last 4 seconds, or like 5 seconds, or something like crazy like that. I remember I wasn't watching the game, but I was paying attention to it on Twitter. I follow, I think Gopher Puck Live is where I get all my stuff from. If you don't listen to them, definitely go check them out. They've been around for probably longer than I've been alive, and they have everything. But I mean, yeah, you collapse like that, and obviously, you respond the next game, and then you go to Wisconsin, and now the goalie interference thing. Like, I mean, what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? I mean, like, I looked at, because I remember, I know like the goalie interference is kind of a little bit interpretive with the ref right now, but there's no reason the Gophers shouldn't have swept that series. I mean, the Gophers could have been up 3-1 in that second game. I know they won an OT in the first game, but no, there's no reason. So, I mean, obviously that changes it. I mean, you Gophers could be looking at a 1 seed at that point, and you're not playing BU. And I mean, it's just little mistakes kind of contributed to where they end up in the season. And I'm not saying they ended up in a bad place. I think that this Gopher team really excelled towards the end of the season. Obviously, next week you get Michigan, Notre Dame, and then that brutal Notre Dame game. I think they lost 6-1. I mean, that was brutal. And then they come back and win an OT the next game. You're like, yeah, maybe they're fine. And then you beat the shit out of Michigan on home ice. And then honestly, swear to God, game of the year. Game of the year was that second Michigan game. I remember I was in Florida at the time, and I was watching it with my girlfriend's family, and it was just back and forth. I mean, look, the Gophers come back in that third period, tie up the game, and they pulled close too, and and we'll talk about that too, with the goaltending situation. But that Airy kid looks good, man.
I was at that second Michigan game, and my lord, like, although it wasn't the result we were looking for, that is the exact type of grit that I think you're looking for in a team, especially like the Gophers, especially in a team that like is lacking that consistency. When the Gophers are down like that and they have that type of grit to come back, even though they lost the game, I think that was such like. I was just saying, like, I was talking to Josh like throughout the entire game, and we were both just both completely fine with how the Gophers played throughout that entire game. But I think like that, looking at the playoff performance, I think that's where like, did we really see that in the Big Ten game? Did we really see that in the NCAA tournament?
I'm going to completely disagree with you about that Michigan game. They looked terrible in the first period. There's no going around that. Obviously, Motzko does a really good job of, corralling his players, I think. And you really saw that in the second and third period. It was so long ago. It could have been just third. But, I know, and we talk about the Michigan game in the playoffs. I mean, they didn't show up, but at the same time, I know that, like, the story was, this Gopher team didn't give a shit about a Big Ten title. They wanted the fucking natty. And they come up short, but, I think that, just the track record that this team's been on for, 4 years now? I mean, they made deep runs. I mean, you national championship game last year, you lose to, I think will be one of the national, either the runner-up or the winner this year. And, it's tough. But the Gophers are on the right track with Motzko. I know he gets some heat because of that Quinnipiac game, which you look at that from two sides, man. I mean, maybe playing shell defense wasn't great, but they were 2 minutes away from winning that fucking natty. I mean, that they were 2 minutes away. And there was a lot of other factors that came into play there. I mean, I think Nyes and Snugrud had a 2-on-1, and Snugrud sent that puck to China. Like, he missed the net by like a great margin. And then obviously close the second goal, like I think it was the first goal. I mean, it should have never gone in. I mean, I could argue the same thing the year prior with the couple wraparound goals against Mankato. It's not the coach's fault. Does he have a factor in the result of that game? Yeah. But Motzko's a good enough coach where he's going to learn from his mistakes, and that's not going to happen again. But obviously, so we talked about the Michigan game. We go into you get the Sioux Falls region, which I think was a really good place for the Gophers to go, because you avoid BC, and because BC is just an absolute wagon. I mean, that Leonard kid is a complete lunatic. Like, swear to God, that Leonard kid is is really good. But so they get BU and they get Omaha in the first game, which I think Omaha is a really interesting matchup because Omaha just took it to North Dakota, and I mean, what, like the first period, you look at the Gophers and you're like, what the hell is going on here? Like the shots are like 20-5 at one point, and then the Gophers start figuring it out. They get a good goal. Clark, fucking Clark's shown up at like every good moment possible, which I'll talk about later about how he's lined up all year, but. I mean, they got a lucky goal and they won the game. They beat Omaha, and that was a good Omaha team. Nobody can take that away from Omaha. That was a good Omaha team. And you go play BU, and this is a BU team that you saw last year. You lose Cooley and you lose Nyes. They gain Celebrini and they keep Hudson. I mean, you got to play a good game to beat them. And the Gophers did play a good game. In the first period, the Gophers played a good game. They were hustling. They were moving the puck well. They're up 2-0. And then puck luck. And that goal beats close. That's probably one he's going to wear for a while. And you let BU right back into it, and you play a team with that many offensive weapons, you're going to pay the price with goals like that. And Gophers season comes to an end. I think they finished the rec this season with like a 20, 21, 22, 10 and 5, something like that. And it's not a bad record, but there's a lot to look forward to next year. And we'll get in the Frozen Four in the next bit here. So yeah, I mean, it was a good season. I think we have a lot to look forward to. You have a lot of guys coming back. Obviously, you lose that core group of Close, Brodzinski, Nelson, and obviously you've just lost Pinanimi and Strobel, but I think Pinanimi and Strobel are kind of a different kind of era echelon that those two are on, or those three were on. And let's talk about the Frozen Four a little bit.
Just like before that, super quick. The one thing about this year in the Gophers, I think off of the wake of last year, I think. After watching the first couple series and the regular season of the Gophers this year, this is about the result. At least I'm speaking for myself, that I expected. This wasn't a team that I thought was going to win the national championship. But if I were to have taken a guess mid-season, it probably would have been the result that we got. And by no means do I think that this year was a disappointment. I think that I think we showed ourselves. I think that BU game was a little bit rough, but next year I think we're gonna be a lot better, and we'll definitely talk about that later.
But and to finish off on that, I mean, you also, when we talk about the transfer portal, I mean, you ignore the fact that Cooley had literally told the U that he was coming back, and then midsummer is like, I'm not coming back because the Coyotes were fucking whining and dining him every night, and they're like, and then he goes to the camp and realizes he's better than everybody on the Coyotes. And, the transfer portal, everybody's already taken. And the U was Motzko was in a tough position there. Yep. I mean, they pulled in Nick Michael, who was from Holy Family and played for St. John's. And then you bring in Jimmy Clark. I know it was between Clark and Hendrickson, and Hendrickson's one of the guys we'll talk about in our upcoming class. But the Gophers were really left with a lot of options. I mean, there were some good players in the portal last year that they missed out on because Cooley initially said he was coming back. But besides the point, we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about the Frozen Four. I mean, it's in St. Paul. Obviously, first time ever. There's no Minnesota teams. We've got Boston College, Boston University, Denver, and Michigan. That is about as blue blood as it gets, and I think that we're in for a treat. And obviously, I think that BC is probably going to be the clear favorite from the cut. They're the number one overall seed. They have 5 losses all season. I think Quinnipiac even had less or more losses than them last year. But I go into it because I'm curious, because I've watched BC and BU play, and I look at BC's game as they're similar to last year's Gopher team in the sense that they have a insane top line. Like, that Will Smith, fucking Ryan Leonard, Gabe Perreault line is absolutely nuts. Yeah. On the other hand, they don't have Brock Faber on their blue line. And we saw that in the Quinnipiac game. I mean, look, this isn't that. I'm not taking anything away from Quinnipiac. That was not as good of a Quinnipiac team as we saw last year. And Quinnipiac took them down to the wire. And that could be on coaching, but that's also on some defensive lapses. I mean, you look at BC. I looked at his stat. They have a lot of power play goals, and they have a lot of players to choose from to play on that power play. I mean, you got Smith, Perreault, Gauthier, Leonard. I mean, you have all guys that could easily be Hobie Baker finalists. And you saw that the Hobie hat trick came out. You know, it's Jackson Blake. I'm gonna blank on this right now. I know Cutter Gauthier is in there, and then Macklin Celebrini. Obviously, he deserves to be there. I don't know. I think I'm stuck because I think Michigan's gonna give them some hell in that game. And you know, we talked about this. You did call me crazy for picking Michigan to come out of that region in Springfield, but or not Springfield. It was the St. Louis region. But I mean, I think it's a toss up, man. I think that Michigan could really give them a run for their money.
Yeah, and I'm completely eating my words about this Michigan team. I mean, seeing that Nazar assist and the way that they're playing in that big of a game, like, this is like it's one of those Frozen Fours when the Gophers aren't in it, but yet I'm still super excited to watch both these games. And I think that this is going to be one of the better Frozen Fours that we've seen, because I don't think it's as clear cut as it kind of has been in the past. And odds say it's going to be BC and BU, and I think that would be a really fun game. But I also think any matchup we get this year is going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, and that's where I think we disagree. I think people want to see a BU BC game, but I don't. I think BC kind of has BU's number this year. I know BU beat him in the, I want to say maybe it was the Beanpot, but BC has BU's number. Denver, on the other hand, I think Denver BC is my pick, and I think Denver comes out of that game, because here's the thing: I think David Carl is the best college coach in the country. I mean, you look at his resume; he's 34 years old, World Junior Championship, National Championship. I mean, how many Frozen Fours has he been to? And he's playing another one. I mean, he knows how to win big games. I mean, you saw, like, obviously he was upset with the placement that the Pioneers got this year, having to play practically as a 1 seed away games. And, you know, comes out and still wins. I mean, that's how you do it. And I know we talked. I know I was listening to Spit and Chicklets the other day, and Biz. I'm not trying to like populate Biz here, but he made a great point about why we should have home site regionals. And I know it's a big topic now, because here's the thing. And Biz said it word for word, and I'll say it. He goes, if you can't stand playing in front of a ruckus crowd, you're not fucking ready for the NHL. Like, you might as well not go. I mean, you look at, like, they're like, one of the big claims was, you look at a school like Bentley, RIT, like, they're like, yeah, we're never going to be able to host a game, so why not, like, put it neutral? You know what? If you want to make the league, you think the Stanley Cup playoffs are neutral site? No. Yeah. It's how you grow the players. And I love that take, but I also can respect the other side, because here's the thing: college hockey is all about growing. It's all about growing these players. College hockey is not the final destination for a majority of these players. I mean, even the low tier players, they'll go play ECHL, AHL, they'll go play overseas, and they'll go play in the NHL. It's all about player development, and I think that them learning how to play in those tough environments, like, you obviously, like, I mean, anytime you go to Yost, Mariucci, Boston College, North Dakota, North Dakota has probably got the coolest rink I've ever freaking seen. And I mean, you got to learn how to play in those environments as a guy who's not expected to be that standout player. And I thought that he had a great argument on that. But going back to the Frozen Four, I think that this is a great field. We'll go through our picks here in a sec. Obviously, BC, BU. I don't really care for either team. I'm picking Denver cautiously. I think that if there was, there's, I think, really only one possible upset there could be, and I think that's Michigan over BC. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Wouldn't be surprised to see a rematch of the 2022 Frozen Four semifinal of Denver, Michigan. I mean, it's a toss-up. I mean, obviously, BC, BU are going to be the favorites, but if I'm going if I'm going through my gut, I think it's going to be BC and Denver, and I think Denver wins. If I'm going with what I want to see, I want to see Michigan. I want to see Michigan, Denver. I can't stand BC BU. I think BC's too. They're a fantastic team, but we've seen the outcome with them in BU, and I just don't think that BU has. Dude, Macklin Celebrini, fucking phenomenal player, but you've seen it. I mean, they can't really hang with the Eagles, and I don't want to see a blowout championship game. I want to see two gritty ass teams go at it and play, and that's what we saw last year with Quinnipiac and Minnesota. And obviously, we didn't get the result we wanted, but it was a number 1 versus number 2 matchup, and I think that the number 1 versus number 2 this year are a little bit more widespread than they were last year.
For my picks, I'm gonna go with probably the safest, probably the more boring pick. I kind of gotta go with BC here. I mean, in their upcoming game against Michigan, I've seen Michigan throughout the series that we've played, and in the last series that the Gophers played against Michigan, that first game on the Gophers' part was horrible. But that is a game that if that Michigan team is on their game, they win 5-1, 6-1, as they are playing now. But they didn't. And it's funny because the Gophers lost that game, but that's only, in my opinion, because that was one of the worst games that I thought that we've played. And I don't know. I think that this BC team is hungry. If you look at the points, the entire top 10 is just riddled with BC players, and they're probably my favorite pick.
This Michigan team's really confusing to me, right? So they have Brindley, Nazar, McGroarty, Casey. I'm forgetting somebody, and I know I am. But, I mean, I kind of like halfway through the season, they were just kind of really shit in the bed, and I go, what is this? I mean, you have so many great players, and I'm like, maybe it's coaching, because that Naruto guy is a relatively young guy, new coach. So, but I really think that Michigan's kind of finding their floor right now, and I think we saw that in the game. I think you got them mixed up. The first game was the blowout, and the Gophers blew them out. The second game, Michigan kind of took over. That first game for Michigan was ugly. That was bad. That I don't think I've ever seen a more unmotivated team. They just kind of gave up after it got out of hand. But I think that Michigan's really figuring themselves out, and I wouldn't be surprised if they come out with their 10th title, or whatever they have. I mean, they're more than us, but yeah, I think that next weekend's gonna be a great weekend of hockey. So now we get to look at next year. I think we're ready to look at next year. We've got a pretty big incoming class. I wrote an article last week with kind of like analyzing all the players. So let's kind of first look at who we got coming back. Obviously, we learned the other day that Snuggerud's coming back. That's huge for the Gophers. He'll likely top the first line, and then I know we're waiting on the old Matthew Wood kind of thing. Again, I'm really indifferent about that. I know there's a lot of people saying that he's favored to go to the Gophers, but I could also see him going to North Dakota. I know that there's something that came out that he had followed a couple North Dakota players. I think it was Jackson Blake and I think it was Ben Strindon or something. But we'll see. I know it would be huge for the Gophers if they got him. I mean, he's like 6'4". He'd be like kind of a great replacement for Nelson. He'd be probably more of a skill guy, but I think he'd be a great replacement. And yeah, but let's look at who's coming back. I know we lose Close, Brodzinski, and Nelson. And you got to replace them. So you have at least 3 openings, and then in the last couple of days, Strobel hits the portal, and so does Pinanini. But none of those really surprise me. I think I picked Pinanini to be the one to go to the portal this year. If anybody, I know we talked about it preseason. I think I was talking with somebody that I think if anybody after this season goes to the portal, it'll be Pinanini, and I think we saw him. Pinanini is not a bad player. I think we saw him kind of struggle to fit in with the big name talent, and I think that became evident late. And he kind of he's also running out of a spot with who's all coming in. All right, yeah, we're talking about we're talking about Pinanini. Sorry, we had some people screaming outside. So yeah, I was thinking about Pinanini. Is I think he was struggling to find a spot, and that's nothing on I think on the Gophers, but I think that he's gonna fit what better someplace else, and I think Strobel will too. I think Strobel. I want to say somebody told me that they thought he was going to UMD, but I don't know. They're both going to end up in places that they'll get better playing time because I mean, I look at that fourth line that Motzko had last year. I think it switched from, I know Pinanini and Strobel kind of switched out as the extra skater, what they call it, and then it was Middlestedt and Clark. I struggled to understand why Clark, like, because I think what we saw last year was there was a more of like there were set lines. Like we didn't really see any movement last year with the lines. This year we saw Motzko kind of shuffle with the lines more, and I really struggled to understand why Clark didn't get time with those bigger lines. I mean, every time he got bumped up early in the season, he shined. I mean, that Michigan series he played great, and then in the Omaha series he has that big goal to tie the game. And I know Motzko said in one of the post games he's so confident that Clark's just going to be a complete game changer for the program, and I agree with him. But going back to what we were saying about departures, obviously Strobel, Pinanini leave. We lose Brodzinski, Nelson, and Close. And I wrote an article about a week ago. I just said that I think that everything that Gopher hockey represents, that those three just embodied it. I think that Justin Close is probably one of the better stories in college hockey, and I know Motzko's talked about this a lot. I mean, a guy that probably wasn't recruited to be a starter gets put in just out of nowhere after LaFontaine decides he's going to go to the NHL. And, I mean, I think he ended the year top 5 or 6 in the country in save percentage. I mean, he was a good goalie. I think I'm undercutting him. I think he was a great goalie. I mean, for his size, I think he was about 5'10", 5'11". He was a good goalie for his size. And then you look at Nelson. I mean, we saw Nelson go on an absolute tear at the end of the season. I mean, you just you couldn't stop him, and he was just a vital part of this team. And I was telling a couple of my buddies, I was like, how fitting would it be? Gophers make the national championship game, and Jackson Nelson scores the overtime game winner to win the Natty.
And I think that is the pure reason. I think he portrayed that in the latter half of the season is why he held that C. He was no Logan Cooley. He wasn't a guy who was putting pucks in the net every single night. But in those final games, he won on a 5-goal weekend. It's just players like that who will just pump up the team, and I think that he truly does embody what Gopher hockey is all about. And I think he kind of showed off kind of those Gopher hockey roots, those not big name guys, but they hold that C and they're gonna step up when it matters.
Yeah, and I came into the season I think a little skeptical about him being the C because Faber was just a super vocal captain from what I've heard just talking around, and you don't know much. You didn't really know much about Nelly, but going in the season. But I really think he stepped up to the captain role and led the team by example, and he's gonna be a big part of Gopher hockey history. And I think Bryce Brodzinski too. I mean, what can you say about Bryce? I mean, that's just a great person, great athlete. I mean, I think he's probably with Flyers right now. I think he'll get a shot. And I know Nelson just signed with Providence, the Bruins, and he got hit his first game the other day. And we'll see what Close ends up. I could see him ECHL, AHL, something like that. I don't know about NHL. I think that he's a little too. I don't want to knock on his size because me and him are the same height. But for a goalie at 5'10", you don't really see that anymore. I think someone told me they're I'm pretty sure Alex Stalock was the last under 6'3" goalie that we've really seen be that good in the pros. And that's just how the culture is changing. You look at Wallstedt 6'5". You look at this who's that? The guy that signed with Philly is fucking 6'7", 6'6". You look at Vasilevsky's huge. I mean, Ottinger is a big kid. I mean, you just need it's big goalies now. So it's going to be a tougher market for him to perform in, but I don't doubt that he'll find a spot somewhere. Okay, so going into next year's recruits, I think I don't know if there's a headline of this class. I know the future of Pride on Ice, if you guys don't follow him, knows everything about recruiting, who's coming in, who's coming out. He's on top of everything. I definitely recommend going to follow. So I know that to headline the class, who do we? Brody Zemer would probably be the name. I think that's going to get the most traction because I think he's a projected, I think probably late first round, second round guy. But you also look at, like Gruba. Leo Gruba's coming in. He's an offensive defenseman. And he's going to have a tremendous impact on this team. So there's a lot of names I think that could headline this class. But I think we'll start with, Brody Zemer, I think, is who we're going to start with. I have Zemer kind of headline this class. He was with the National Team Development Program last year. 51 games played. 51 games played, 54 points, 24 goals, 30 assists. I've watched a couple of his games through live stream. Just a really good skater, and I saw that he just knows where to be. I think he is one of those guys that he can, when he develops chemistry with you, he knows where you are going to be, and I think he could be a great. And I said this in my article that I think he could be a top 6 forward for the Gophers next year. Next guy I have is Eric Paulson. He's from Sweden, but he's also playing for Dubuque right now. He's on actually the same line as one of our other guys, Beckett Hendrickson. Paulson really actually captured my attention last year. I know he was leading the USHL at one point in points, and then I think he got injured. But he did finish the season over a point per game with Dubuque. He was at 52 games played, 63 points, 23 goals, and 40 assists. That's just. I think what we see with Paulson is we see a big capable guy that knows where to be. And I know that I've seen a couple of like the potential fucking lineup renderings for next year that they kind of slate him as a third line guy. I mean, if Eric Paulson's your fourth line guy, I mean you've got a team. And I think Paulson's one of those guys you got to keep an eye out for next year. And just a great athlete, great vision. I mean, I've been watching a couple of his clips. I mean, it just how he sneaks right to the front of the net. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to snipe you. He's a guy that's going to get in front of the net and jam pucks in. And I think that's what the Gophers need.
Yeah, I think that's something that, like, the Gopher hockey program for the last couple of years has just been such raw skill. And I think just, like, having just, like, a big body in front of the net could just be a massive addition to this team.
So, obviously, we'll go next with his line partner, Beckett Hendrickson. So, obviously, if you know the last name Hendrickson, you can probably assume that he is related to Darby Hendrickson, and you're right, he is his kid. So, Beckett's also in Dubuque on the same line as Paulson, and he has 43 games played, 43 points, 18 goals, and 23 assists. Beckett was one of the people that were considered to come in to fill the spot for Cooley last year, but they ended up choosing Clark. One thing I wrote about in my article is just a great improvement of a season for Hendrickson. I think he was a little bit under a point per game last year, but I mean his game has just completely skyrocketed this year. I mean I think he was player of the week 2 weeks in a row at one point. I mean he's a great player. He's going to be a great addition to this team, and then look next at Leo Gruba. He's one of the guys I thought might be the best in this class. He's with the Fargo Force right now, and he's a defenseman. Let's keep in mind he's a defenseman. 57 games played, 55 points, 21 goals, 34 assists as a defenseman. I look at this stat, and I'm careful about this because I look at this stat and I go, this screams like superstar. Because, what USHL defenseman's doing this? He, in the USHL completely, he's the only defenseman top 40 in points in the USHL. Only defenseman top 40. And I think he sits at, I want to say, 17th in points. Like, sitting with, centers, right wings, all these guys. He's up there. He's going to be a force for the Gophers blue line next year. And I've talked to a bunch of people who know him, and they're like, he's great defensively, but he's even better offensively. He is on the blue line 1 second, and he is in front of the net pounding in a goal the next set.
Yeah. And like you said, you got to be careful with this just because of, like, you never really know with, like, these guys. But the second thing I think about after that is Sam Renzel. Whether you want to put these two guys together, if you want to put them on different lines, like, we're going to have that offensive defenseman on multiple lines. And I think the only question there is if our, our true defensive defenseman is going to suffer. But I think that in the eyes of the offense, having two guys like that who have that much offensive pressure could open up so much for the offensive core.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the difference between him and probably Renzel are the heights. And I know Renzel's like, what, 6'5", 6'6". I think Gruba sits about like 6 foot, something like that. So, yeah, we'll be interested to track how Gruba does. Next guy I got is John Whipple. He's part of the National Team Development Program, U18. Yeah, 31 games played, 15 points, 1 goal, 14 assists. I've talked to a couple people that know him. They said just gritty defender, like knows what he's doing. He's not going to be your point producer guy, but he's going to be your reliable defenseman guy. And I think that's something the Gophers could really utilize as like maybe a last pair defenseman. He's going to be young, so. But you're also bringing him up to a group, like a seasoned group, and you got Chesley. I mean, you might get Fish coming back. You've got Renzel. I mean, all these guys that have been playing for the Gophers. And I think he's going to fit in great. And then we have August Falloon. He's with Tri-City right now. I did pick him as my one player that I thought might not be playing next year. So he's with Tri-City right now, 43 games played, 29 points, 15 goals, 14 assists. Just your solid two-way player. I think he's really more of a depth player for Motzko. He's not one you're going to expect to put up Hobie Baker numbers or anything like that, but I think a really good depth player for the Gophers. And then a big question mark is around Brady Yakish. 49 games played this year, 25 points, 4 goals, 21 assists. Just, another one of those just pure defenders that, 21 assists, that's a good number to have as a defenseman. I mean, he moves the puck really well. I know he was at Benilde St. Margaret's for a while, being from that area, you've kind of seen his game, so definitely one person to look out for. I think that he might be one of the guys that are considered to go back to juniors or USHL. But, but I think the class next year for the Gophers, it presents an opportunity to be deeper. Yeah. I think what you saw last year was 3 really good lines that meshed together and then one line that was really gritty but wasn't producing points. I think what you're going to see for the Gophers next year are 4-point producing lines. Yeah. And I think that'll be really helpful for them.
I also just think, like, the overall talent, I think next year is just super exciting, just looking at these players. Like, I think just for all Gopher hockey fans, I think that the disappointment of last year almost, in a way, carried into this season because of how special that Logan Cooley, Nye's Snuggerud team was. But I'm super excited to see what this team brings in next year.
Yeah, and I look at. Think about adding Matthew Wood. This team could be deep. I think regardless they're going to be like one of the 5, 6, 7 favorites to make a run at the national championship. But if they put Matthew Wood on that team, I think they're. And I know it depends because I have heard rumors around that Perreault and Smith might come back for another year. I think Leonard's gone. I think he's proved himself. That man's a absolute fucking lunatic. He's that guy that's gonna score and then just absolutely rub it in your face that he scored on you. I love that. You hate when he's against you, but God, he just brings so much energy to the game. And then there's rumors that Macklin Celebrini gonna come back, and guess who's coming in with him? Yeah. Cole Iserman. That could be a dangerous line because I know Cole's stock has dropped a little bit because he struggles on defense, but college hockey could be in for one next year. But it all depends. It's early, and we're probably the first people that are actually maybe even putting a look at next year because we don't know who's going to come in. Right now we know there's 5 spots available, like offensively, and we know that. We could have more people transfer out. You don't know. You give big question marks around Nevers and Fish, and that's kind of where the Gophers sit right now. It's really kind of like figure yourself out time.
And that's just like, I'm so excited about college hockey, like almost now more than ever, just with how much top tier talent is in the game. at this level. Like back in the day, like for those of you who saw Michigan's Nazar, like between the legs pass into the goal, like that really wasn't a massive thing back then, but it feels like Pitlick's goal last year against Michigan, where he's just absolutely undressing him on a breakaway and scoring. Like, I can't remember a single time when we saw anything like that. So, regardless of the team we get next year, I mean, like we said, like at this time last year, we thought we were going to have Logan Cooley again. So, anything could change, but regardless, I think it's an exciting time just to be a college hockey fan.
That Pitlick goal was the nastiest fucking goal I think I've ever seen, by the way. I mean, dude, Stephen Holtz was just absolutely undressed by him. Yeah. That was insane. And then, obviously, you're supposed to have Cooley back, and that doesn't happen. But it's college hockey, man. Shit happens. And if you're a Gopher fan, man, with Motzko, driving the bus right now, you've got some shit to look forward to. Yeah. I mean, Motzko's a fantastic coach, fantastic recruiter, and there's just so much to look forward to. And we're going to learn more as the summer goes on. I mean, it's not even summer yet. I mean, this is like the first time we've been in the 60s since we had that random spurt in late March. It's so early. And we're going to learn more, and so is everybody else. I mean, we haven't even been crowned champion yet. There's so much more that can happen. I mean, you got to wait on Matt Wood's fucking decision. You got to wait on, even if Pitlick comes back. I think Pitlick's coming back, but he hasn't confirmed that yet. I mean, he was tied with Snuggerud for points last year. There's so much yet to be determined. And then you got to look at the goaltending situation for the Gophs. You look at Airy. He didn't play a lot this year, and that was the problem, is because I know Motzko talked about, he was planning to kind of like switch him out a little bit this year during those, random series, but Airy was injured for the first half of the season. The first game he got was that U.S. national team game, and he looked good. I mean, he's a tall kid. He's a tall goalie, and then he gets the Robert Morris game, wins that game, and then gets shoved into the Michigan game when Close gets pulled. I mean, I think he actually got the Notre Dame game too. I mean, he's a young kid. Is he going to save every shot that comes his way? No. Is a fifth-year senior going to do that? No. I think the future's bright with Airy, and I think Motzko thinks that too. And he said that in the post-game plan. So, obviously, there's a lot to figure out for next year, but I don't know about you, man, but I'm excited for next year at Mariucci. I think there's a lot to look forward to, NIL-wise, Gopher hockey-wise, and just I think being back in Mariucci next year is going to be fucking awesome. I think that's going to wrap us up for today. I mean, this is our first one. Obviously, it wasn't perfect, and you're gonna see that in the initial recording. But we love doing this. I mean, Gopher hockey. I think like a lot of people, we love it, and we love doing podcasts. That's why we started one. And honestly, if any of you guys have anything you guys want us to discuss, feel free to DM us. I mean, if we disagree on something, you can reach out to us. I'm more than happy to talk to you about Gopher hockey. I mean, we got a long off season coming up, so there's gonna be a lot of questions to be asked.
And I've been proven wrong probably over 1 million times. So if there's something that any of us say, just feel free to debate us on it, and we could have a good conversation. And we'll send out a tweet every single time we're about to record. And if you have any questions or subjects you guys would like us to talk about, we'll definitely try and touch on it.
I think that's going to wrap us up for today. We appreciate you guys all, if you made it this far, listening to us today. We look forward to talking to you next time. From Josh and Jack here. Peace.